We help new entrepreneurs from small and medium scale industries to establish their business, to grow their business by addressing their challenge. I'd like to first give you a brief introduction about myself and my company. So I have around 20 years of experience in manufacturing domain across multiple geographies. I have dealt with multinational companies selling products from outside India to another country. I have dealt with Indian companies selling products outside India, and I have dealt with international companies selling products in India. So that's my experience in brief. Talking of SolutionBuggy, it's the unique platform in India that connects small and medium scale industries in manufacturing sector with the subject matter experts. There are around 60,000 small and medium scale enterprises associated with us. Similarly, there are around 8,000 subject matter experts or consultants which are associated with us. We help them through our platform by connecting them, bridging the gap, and by addressing the challenge. So we have a platform which comes into picture. We also execute long-term and strategic projects. We also help companies. We also help the companies mentor. So we have industry leaders with us who mentor entrepreneurs, top leadership, decision makers in small and medium scale industry to solve or address their challenges. So I welcome you here for this seminar based on developing international business. Talking of small and medium scale industries in India, there are around 63 million or 6.3 crore small and medium scale enterprises in India, growing at the rate of 10 to 12% per year. They contribute almost 30% of the national gross domestic product. And the reason why we have chosen this particular topic today is this small and medium scale industry in India contributes almost 40% of 48.1% as per data of financial year 2019. It contributed 48.1% of exports, and the focus of India is to grow this export contribution from 50% to 60%, which means the exports have to be increased. Now the question is, why does a company go for international business of or exports? The first and foremost reason is companies have capacities, and at the same time, to bring in more demand, to bring in more volumes for manufacturing, they go for international markets. In this way, the incoming demand is increased and hence the capacity utilization also. The second reason why companies go for exports or international business is increasing the bottom line of profits. There could be a heavy and fierce competition in India, but if you go to international markets, there's a different dynamics. We change the paradigm and then hence beat the competition. The third reason of going international that companies adopt is risk mitigation. So if there is an issue in one of those countries, then might be the demand from the other countries will keep continuing, and hence the risk is mitigated. Similarly, lot of companies, they internationalize because they want to increase the life cycle of a particular product. For example, a particular product could be more suitable to the income levels, to the consumer class of a certain type of country. But at the same time, if it goes mature, it can go to a country which is developing. So these are all the reasons behind international, why companies go for international business. Now, because we deal only with most of the time with manufacturing sectors, the manufacturing MSMEs export was around $189 billion in financial year 18, and that's why it makes sense for us to have focus on business which is developed on the basis of exports. So, welcome everyone. I would like to now introduce the panel of experts we have, and we would like to listen from them. So, before I pose a question to these experts, I would like to first introduce them. So, the first expert that we have with us is Mr. Oren Simon. He joins us from Tel Aviv, Israel. Mr. Oren has 40 years of experience in the industry. He is not only a skilled entrepreneur, but also an inspiring, optimistic, and resilient leader. He has developed businesses across geographies and countries like Russia, France, Japan, Italy, to name a few. He is an aeronautical engineer from Israel Institute of Technology and has worked with Israeli Air Force for more than a decade. And I suppose there is a team from Indian Air Force also amongst the audience who is listening to us. Presently, he is president of Business Development Dynamics and helping SMEs across the globe achieve growth in new international markets by providing hands-on business development support in any part of the world. So I welcome Mr. Oren.
Thank you.
And I look forward to your inputs. So my question to you would be, with your such a huge experience across the globe in developing business, can you share some examples where small manufacturing companies have been able to successfully establish their market outside the base country? You may give one or two examples of your choice.
Thank you. So first of all, it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you all for attending. As VUCA said, Business Dynamics is a hands-on company, and this relates directly to the examples that I use. As a consultancy that helps companies develop their business, we take the approach of hands-on, which means that we actually deploy in the field in order to facilitate business growth for the companies that we serve. And the first example that I want to use as a demonstration is actually an Indian company that manufactures ball bearings that are specific for seagoing vessels. So this is a niche. And one of the things that you immediately see when you are talking about small and medium small businesses, usually they have a niche, which requires us, because they are small, because they are developing something very specific, to devise what I call guerrilla tactics, to find a solution that is tailored 100% for this case, and there is no general solution for everybody. Every company, every situation, every market, every product needs their own tailoring. So this company came to us and they said, we are very well established in India. We are very well established in Africa through contacts that we have. We would like to increase our market into Europe and grow both our bottom line, but more than that, kind of grow our exposure as a leading manufacturer within the niche. When we analyzed the market, what we immediately saw from the first canvas that we did is that with what they do, the best approach to penetrate the market is to go very little, very, I would say, simple, in taking a single person to go up and down the coast where the European continent meets the sea on both sides, Mediterranean and the Atlantic Ocean, and go from one shop to another where they fix boats and start a dialogue, start leaving product samples, and after a while, this translates into inquiries, into, hey, do you have that kind of ball bearing? Do you have that kind of ball bearing? And in relatively a short time, the company becomes a known supplier along the market that is relevant to them. And from there on, you can now start growing the business. Okay? So I want to take from this a lesson. Okay? You start with testing your product in the market. You put your product in the market. You don't build big plans. You don't go and invest a lot of money upfront in creating a lot of marketing collateral and creating a lot of personnel investment in training salespeople and so forth. Simple, take one guy, train him according to the profession that is needed here, in this case, engineering, mechanical engineering, and start looking at the market. So this is a relatively straightforward thing. I want to show you something which is a completely non-straightforward thing to exemplify how guerrilla tactics may serve in a completely unforeseen way what you need. We had a small winery that does special wine, boutique style, relatively high cost. And for some reason, they decided that they want to penetrate Japan. Okay, they're a small French-like type of wine manufactured in Israel, and they wanted to penetrate Japan. So we started talking to Japanese people, asking them about wine. And immediately we learned that Japanese like beer. They don't like wine. So where do they drink wine? They drink wine in restaurants. And here comes the way that business dynamics operates. You could, for instance, hire a student in the Tokyo University and send her with a small smartphone to go one restaurant after the other, okay, according to Yelp or TripAdvisor or whatever, and make a list of 100 restaurants and take a snapshot of their wine list. Okay. Then you take all the snapshots and you send it over to people who can do data entry so that they can fill all the data that was collected in a way that a computer can read. Then you take all this data and you send it to an AI specialist who can visualize this data and create a map of Tokyo with all the restaurants and all the different wine brands that are carried by those restaurants. Going back to the winery, showing them the map, they go, this one. This restaurant represents us regarding the wines. We are like this wine. We are like this ballpark for pricing. And from here to get to the distributor, to get to a deal, is relatively close, because the most serious gap that you have when you come into a market is understanding what the market wants, understanding how you fit into that market, and understanding the barriers of entry. For instance, in Japan, like in many other places in the world, importing alcohol requires permits. And only specific people have these kinds of permits. So you need to navigate your business development to create some kind of partnership with one of these distributors. Now, these are two very extreme examples. One is relatively traditional, I would say. Take a sales guy, go up and down the coast and sell your products. Start small, grow as the market grows. The other one looks at a market research, I would say, kind of approach, and uses guerrilla tactics in order to get real data, and this is the importance, real data. If I would go into statistics and see that there is an increase of 3.6% of annual consumption in Japanese wine, Japanese consuming wine, 3.6 growth, I would assume, coming from a European orientation, I would assume that it is mostly going to retail. Now, if I had that in mind from a business development perspective, I would have invested a lot of effort in connecting to the retail system, distribution system, which would have been a total waste of money and a total waste of time, and it would never go because the only place where Japanese people would buy wine is in a restaurant. So, two lessons that I take from these two stories. One, minimize your initial investments, take it slowly, don't jump, learn the market first, and use direct approaches in order to let the market tell you what it wants. Otherwise, you are making a gamble, and gambles in business, sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. Answered?
Thanks for your inputs. Very interesting. So this is really very hands-on experience, and where you have developed business. You are located in one place, the supplier is located in a second place, and the customer is located in the third place. So that's really very interesting. So yeah, so what I see is there are three kinds of generic strategies that companies adopt. The first one is, of course, internationalize, but at the same time customize. So there could be a company like GE, which comes to a country like China. They will have some customized product, and there is an example of an ultrasound machine which is quite mobile and used in rural areas of China, and then they develop that product for that particular market. So this is first way. The second way companies adopt to go internationalize and do business outside is standardization. So they have a standard product, and then when their own first their home country market is saturated, they try to sell it outside, but the product remains the same. The third kind of strategy that companies adopt is subcontracting or outsourcing. So only subcontract or give that kind of work or outsource that kind of work where you will get low cost advantage or an advantage which is not there in your home country. I'll give an example of lot of R&D centers of big multinational companies that are there in Tel Aviv, Israel. I could see all multinational companies having core R&D centers in Israel. And the reason behind it is Israel is a place where a lot of R&D can be done. But of course, it's not the ideal place to have the big manufacturing plants. But that's the way. But because those organizations will have an edge if they open such R&D center in Israel, that's why they have it. Similarly, we see a lot of companies outsourcing engineering services in India. And that's because a lot of cultural and cultural factors. People know English, people are young, lot of people are from engineering background, and of course low cost advantage. So these are the three generic strategies that are adopted by companies which I observe to internationalize. So with this we move to the next speaker, Mr. Gianluigi Olivari. Gian's career of 40 plus years has been focused on sales and marketing. He has been a sales executive, sales manager, marketing and sales director, general manager, managing director, board member in different organizations from 1 to 2 employee organization to being responsible for leading 3,000 employees in a well-established firm. He has extensively worked in different industries ranging from FMCG, industrial products, services, retail, and have been associated with global brands like Kodak, Hitachi, Yamaha, BMG International, Jamco International, etc. Mr. Olivari has academic background in mechanical engineering and economics. He likes running, reading, and writing. So welcome, Gian. So my question to you is related to European business. So can you give me some examples of challenges that are faced by companies that try to enter Europe in particular?
Okay, this is not an easy question, and I'll try to be as precise as possible. From my point of view, the main challenge I see, in addition to the normal things which has to be solved, arranging export activities to Europe, I think it lies in making visible the product's quality of the production. I'll try to explain it a bit better. Most EU citizens are demanding, or very demanding in terms of quality. They are used to buy German cars, French wines, Italian shoes and food, Swiss watches, and so on. This is a premium price market share. It stays on top of the market. On the other side, generally speaking, in Europe, there's plenty of low-cost items from China for those who cannot afford premium products. This is a very price-driven market, a very price-sensitive market. So from marketing point of view, manufacturers from India, I think, are really challenged to select where to aim at. And my advice, frankly speaking, is to avoid both extremes. And now I'll tell you why. Low cost looks like a risky area. Low cost products looks like a quite risky area. Price-driven consumers are used to change supplying source very frequently for even small price difference. If they find something which is more or less the same with a cost of €1 less, they simply change, because they are driven by prices, not by quality. I try to give you an example. Let's say you are a player in a very cheap spectacles markets, something like that, you know. And you sell them in a good volume. You realize a nice business abroad. You are a successful company in many different countries in Europe. But the problem is lying in the fact that once another manufacturer finds a way to sell almost the same item at €1 less, you are done. Your business risks really to vanish. The second warning light is, let's say that in high-end products are lying other risks. For instance, this kind of market segment is usually very well established and with strong and high barriers to entry. Breaking them is a matter of huge investment and a lot of time. Probably, considering all that, probably the best breakthrough area is to target the middle part of the market, looking for good price-quality ratio from consumers' point of view. And to me, this is the safest way, or maybe, if you wish, if you prefer, the less risky way to afford new markets and to afford an export activity, an export operation. As an example of that, the concept of an advertising campaign, advertising efforts could be very good quality at Chinese prices. And this probably is able to move some interest. Of course, one of the things which is important is to be sure that the products could be welcome in the market. So I completely share what Torrens told before, to make some area tests just to have, beyond the market analysis and so on, to have a sort of proof, physical proof that the products could be sold successfully before to make large investments and complicated plans and so on. I don't know if you answered your question, Vikas, but if not, please let me know that I'll go ahead. I'll add something more.
Thank you. So I got the answer, saying that European market is of course quality conscious, but at the same time it's price conscious also. But having said that, everything, it is more important to have the real data than to rely on theoretical observations, theoretical discussions, or theoretical market research report. I think this is what I comprehend from what you said. I
Yeah,
hope
more or
it's
less is the story.
fine. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So, with this, we move to the next speaker, who is from textile and apparel industry. And this industry has been quite important for us in small and medium scale sector. The first reason is 80% of the industries working in this area are small and medium scale. This is the first reason. The second thing is, uh, the textile and apparel exports accounted to around $38.7 billion in 2019. So if we think of increasing our export, this is the area we look for. So I would like to give an introduction of the next speaker, Mr. Vijaya K. Vijaya is an entrepreneur. He is the founder of Kosha Designs. He is textile engineer and an alumnus of XLRI Jamshedpur. He has over 15 years of experience in textile and apparel sector, both in operations and consulting. He has worked for fashion brands in Europe and US, supporting them in operations. As a management consultant, he has worked with several brands across the globe in the area of market assessment, growth strategy, and advised government on market assessment, competitive benchmarking, export competitiveness, and policy impact studies. So as I told that he was here representing an international company looking for sourcing partnership in India. So he does have that outside in perspective with him. So my question to Mr. Vijay is, from an outside in perspective, what is the impact of COVID on textile and apparel sectors in India? And what are your suggestions to small and medium scale enterprises for survival and succeeding in these times?
Yeah. Thank you, Vikas. So COVID, as you know, has impacted most of the sectors, right? So yet, if you look at the fashion sector, because of its discretionary nature, the segment is particularly vulnerable. So before, for example, prior to COVID, there were expectations. The forecast was about that, compared to 2019, the exports are expected, or rather imports from EU and as well as US were expected to grow by 3 to 4%. Whereas now, post-COVID, the overall imports from US as well as EU from across the world are expected to be reduced by 30%. So that will have impact on every country, including India as well. So what does it mean is, like, today, US as well as EU overall in terms of apparel and textile does about $280 billion of imports. Whereas now during 2020, because of the COVID, so it's expected to go down by at least $80 billion of businesses to reduced. So this will have a ripple effect on the entire supply chain. So today, supply chains, if you see, are struggling with order cancellations, or payment issues, and some of the stuff waiting at the ports. So you have all kind of issues which is it clicking with. So now that also can be seen in the share market. So whereas if you see the average market capitalization for textile and apparel companies in US has reduced by 40%, which is far higher than the other entire stock market, and they're expecting now that there is going to be bankruptcy of many of the companies in the retail brands. So it's not that COVID is the only reason. So even prior to COVID, the fashion retailers were having their own share of issues and profitability issues, especially because of change in consumption in terms of One is the online. The trend was moving more towards online. So that was the biggest trend. And then there was some changes in the consumer attitudes as well, which kind of impacted them. So now with this background, how is the whole supply chain is going to shape is the most important question we need to see before we address the question of how SMEs can use this as an opportunity or kind of overcome this threat, right? So when obviously when the demand reduces, so some of the buyers are going to go for the consolidation in terms of sourcing. And then, as Vikas was also pointing out, there is going to be a risk mitigation strategy. So now there is a lot of anti-China trends, which we can see both in India and many of the countries in US as well as. So naturally, there is going to be much more impact on China, though not as much as probably the anti-China sentiment itself is there. Because there is too much of reliance on China for the entire supply chain. So what generally we see is that there is China plus one strategy. Okay, not just because of COVID, it's also because most of the geographies have their own problems, maybe political issues and natural calamities and epidemics. So considering this, there has been a general what do you call that trend of saying that geographical diversification is more important for the end customers in US. So there is some of the strategies like China plus one. So if somebody has a sourcing base in China, can I have one more base? So be it say India or Vietnam, so Bangladesh, so it could be any of this place. So that's one thing. So obviously China is going to be the big loser, but there is probably the biggest gainer in this whole game will be Vietnam, right? So another trend we can see is that apart from this what do you call sourcing consolidation as well as China plus the risk mitigation, so we will see that because the demand is going to be much more uncertain going forward, when the economy kind of economic engine restarts, there is going to be a stress or uncertainty in terms of orders. Like there is going to be uncertainty in demand, which is going to trickle down to the entire value chain. What does it mean? So the orders may not come in one tranche, but it can be a staggered orders. So there is going to be a more stress on how your supply chain can be more agile, so that there is suddenly a consumer likes certain designs. What can we do to quickly replenish them? So so people won't take the risk of ordering a large quantity in the one say tranche. So to address this, one of the strategies which one of the European studies showed that is the European buyers are so have some percent. It might not be the large quantity, but say 4-5% of their business can it be brought back to nearby locations. So where you call it as proximity sourcing or nearshoring. So can we bring back some of the orders so that there is more agility in the overall supply chain? So now these are the trends which also the SMEs should keep it in mind, say that how can we become more agile, yeah. So what are the other things? So in addition to this, there is another underlying change which is happening with the consumer behavior with respect to the entire fashion chain. So there is fast fashion used to be the norm, and today that is changing slowly. Even company like Zara, which is a luxury fashion retailer or affordable luxury, so these guys are fast fashion guys and are closing 1,600 stores permanently. So, and they wanted to move more towards digital as a strategy. So there is online as a strategy, and second thing is even from a consumer side, from a fast fashion, so the trends of conscious consumption is emerging. And so it is not that across all the segment this cost conscious, but definitely in the mid segment this is going to be kind of accelerated. And so what does it mean? That there is people are kind of growing antipathy towards waste producing business models which are damaging the environment, and they're looking for a more of a purpose driven and sustainable action. So what does it mean for SMEs? So can we, our product positioning or our marketing positioning, can it be that we are more conscious about environment? How are you reducing the waste? How are you reducing the water footprint or energy footprint? So can this be communicated effectively to your consumer as well, so that there is a case for them? It becomes an hygienic factor for many of the people, though it might not give you additional cost benefit or something like that, but it can definitely give you an edge to build a better relationship with them. And as like all crisis, every crisis is an opportunity. So I see that for an SMEs or any companies, the resilience during this tough time will be the key. And the crisis can, we will see that it will shake out the weak, and whereas it will probably reinforce the strong and accelerate the growth in strong organizations. So what does it mean? It means that in the next 4 or 5 months, then a lot of companies are going to go bankrupt, and there is going to be a massive wave of consolidation. And lot of, even among SMEs, there is a lot of companies which will probably be not existing in the next 6 months. So it means that there is going to be some white space which is going to be created for the existing as well as resilient SME spaces. So can the SMEs get that, use these spaces? Just look around you and see the companies which are struggling or closing down. Can you work out with a deal wherein you get their consumers, you get some kind of business relationship with their consumers, can be reinstated, so that you can build upon that, right? So the next thing is I see is that as an SMEs, it is not about one SME competing, right? So whereas a large organization has enough muscle power, money power, as well as people power to kind of do many things, whereas an SMEs always are work under a constraint. And what does it mean? It means that you probably, this is the time where one can look for more collaboration as well as complementing. If there is a fabric supplier and you are an apparel supplier, can you collaborate with him, make a certain developments, and show it a collection, so it will be a win-win for both of you. So similarly, if somebody is a denim manufacturer, another is a shirting manufacturer, can you guys collaborate and cross-sell your products for the customers, right? And collaboration with upstream as well as downstream companies will be there. However, the way I see the biggest positive right now we see for most of the companies, include SMEs, is the digital technologies. So digital is the new highway. Okay, the digital trends is a kind of most important opportunity for an SMEs right now. So there was earlier, everything used to happen face to face. Now it has moved to anywhere, anything from anywhere, literally. So what does it mean? It means that now today everything is on. You don't have to travel to Italy or say US to do a customer meeting, right? You can still log in, and the way we are talking from Italy and Europe. So a lot of sales meetings, sample approvals, design and development meetings are happening online. So this is where you had a large companies had a large teams which were stationed in US or Europe. So you don't need to do that anymore, right? So there is going to be an opportunity which is created because of this. So, and it may be a small step though, because of what you call COVID, this entire thing of having online as becoming a norm now, right? So this, I feel it may be a small step as a convenience, but the thing is that for SMEs, I see this particular digital trend as a big leap which can be kind of leveraged. And so even right from digital trade shows to virtual events, you have a lot of issues. So again, coming to digital trends, I see that the more as the retail is moving towards a more of a brick and mortar to a more of a digital way. I see that even SMEs, the overall digital marketing as a time as well as cost, you need to integrate much more with your own businesses, be it with B2B marketplaces or B2B business to consumer marketplaces. So your websites. So it's going to be much more important now. Can you invest? See, today the technology, if you see, is becoming much more affordable, right? Having a simple smartphone and being an amateur, you can make a world-class videos today. So world-class photographs you can do so with the available facilities at a very low cost. So can SMEs leverage these things to build their own credentials, in terms of be it your facility videos or what is your skill levels, how you're working with the environment. So can you build this entire thing so that the overall the relationship or your own what do you call impression with the end consumers will improve, right? So, and you have a better opportunity wherein you can connect with the customer much more. So, and then you have this opportunities again, especially like Gian was saying. So a lot of these companies are niche companies, especially SMEs. If you talk about, they have a niche value proposition. So what does it mean? It also means that there are a lot of in this space, you have certain competitiveness. So can we use a traditional channel of wholesaler or retailer, can we directly go to the customer over the marketplaces, build a brand with your niche capability? So these are all emerging opportunities. I see that one should not miss out right now. So overall, the way you look at it is, one is, I would say, what are the resources, right, for Indian SMEs? If you see, a cotton is a strength. So can we use the local strengths and create much deeper products? You have a niche, but within that, can you create a deeper products? I once was advising one of the client on how Indian SMEs are comparable with, say, SMEs elsewhere. So where we as a team, we visited several countries, both in Europe, Asia, and we try to see how it can be like Turkey and China, Bangladesh, Vietnam. We did a complete comprehensive study of, in terms of cost, skills, everything we compared, and see that how does it kind of impact the competitiveness of a nation. So during the study, when I saw that, I went to Europe, especially Turkey and all. So you have a lot more SMEs there. So from the outside, if you see, the presentation, the way R&D capability they have, so the amount of time they spend or efforts and money is much more related to the other countries that I have seen. So they could build that, design capability, R&D capability, and create a much more niche and much more integrated with the markets. So I feel that very similar strategy wherein we look at, can we look at more of a technology and which is again, India has got a lot more strength in tech side. So can we leverage that technology to build your operational effectiveness? The third one is, can you value add? For example, we have millions of craftsperson across India. So can you leverage that? Can you provide a much more value addition to your own customers, right? So, and use this opportunity to build your strengths and also have a differentiation from any other countries. You cannot where your strength lies. Play probably with your strengths rather than getting into a mass like Jian was saying. You cannot compete at the place. SMEs cannot compete at the low cost mass market, whereas we are well placed to compete at a, say, better quality at affordable price. Kind of, that kind of balance should be the positioning, leveraging the both market scenario as well as your own strengths. So these are my thoughts about it.
This is here.
Yeah, Vikas.
Still alive,
We
Vikas?
lost our moderator.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm back.
Okay.
I was disconnected in between. Sorry for that. So I heard almost 80% of what Vijay said. So yeah, so it's going to be challenging times ahead of us for all small and medium scale businesses. So with this, I move to our next speaker, Mr. Oren, and I would like to ask him. So he has spoken, he has dealt with so many companies worldwide. So if you can, Oren, tell us what are the typical characteristics or differentiation of a company which has succeeded in international environment versus a company which has not been able to perform with the expectation with which they started engaging with you. And you can give some examples also for the benefit of everybody.
I think that the most, I would say, most common and most critical at the same time is I call it the brain lock. Okay, usually people want, or managers want to grow their business, but they don't fully realize the transformation, the inner transformation that their organization needs to go through in order to be qualified. I'm using a difficult word. To compete in the receiving market. There is many times an assumption, sometimes declared when it's good and non-declared when it's worse, that the same kind of culture and context and business making atmosphere that small businesses are familiar with in their own territory and in their own markets. And once they go into a new market, they need to learn the language. And not only the language because the people speak German, but they need to learn the cultural language of what's appropriate and what's not, and what's acceptable and what's not, and what's the cost point of activities. Like, for instance, if you're coming out of India, the example that I used at the beginning, it's an Indian company. They're relatively big. Okay, they are in the tens of millions of dollars per year. And they couldn't, or it took them some thinking to figure out that a qualified person working for them in Europe is going to cost about 8 times that the same type of person is going to cost them in India. Okay, now this is a gap. Not only that, the way that the European will work with them and the way that, and let's say a counterpart, an Indian counterpart would work with them would be a completely different kind of opera. Norms are different. The way that you report things are different. And usually these are the kind of gaps that are a foreteller of whether this is going to work or not. The amount of resistance that the company has to adapt itself to the new market is usually a very big issue on the list. There is another one which is very big. Companies, because as you said in the beginning, companies look for new markets many times because they have excess capacity. And they would love to have something that runs, let's say, 2 shifts a day, and they would love to operate at the 3rd shift, but they need to find new markets in order to make that work. And the problem is that what they know from their own internal process and their QA procedures and their checkpoints and their packaging and their reporting and up to the color of the sticker, doesn't really match the expectation of the receiving market. And many times we get things like, I want to give an example. There is, I mean, every one of us who travels experienced going into a hotel room, seeing 3 remotes on the table, and there is one for the air conditioner, one for the set-top box, and one for the TV screen. And it is written in a language you cannot read, and the menu on the screen itself is in a language that you cannot read. And I got lost many times. And the only thing I want is to see TV. I want to see the news in a language I can figure out. So there is a guy who takes and builds a remote control, which is universal, which means you can program it to do some very basic functions on any combination of air conditions or room control, lighting control, bed, TV, movies, whatever. Now the question was, okay, he's selling very well in specific territories. Now he wants to go into a new territory. What do you do? How do you look at it? So our approach is, okay, we start fishing the market. We set up a sales team. We start doing actual sales of the remote control to hotels in a test area. But what we do is that we use what we call a matrix. So we build 3 price points, 3 value propositions, 3 slogans, okay? And we test them here and there in order to get the numbers. The biggest problem that we have in order to sell, and now I'm saying something which is completely stupid, but it works. I mean, it actually happens. If you try to sell something to Turkey and you package it in pink, it's not gonna happen, okay? But if you package it in light blue, you have a hit. And I can show you statistics about the same product packaged in the same way, in the same kind of box, but 2 different colors, where one would be a hit and the other one would be a no-hit. Now, what is the understanding from this? First of all, test your market. Don't come with hypotheses about the market because you don't understand the market. You're coming from a different culture, okay? So one of the things that we do in business dynamics is that we use a concept which is called locality, global locality, and we always have a local representative working with the customer in his own territory, and we always have locals working the market in their own territory, okay? So that we can mitigate these gaps. I hope I'm answering your question because you're on mute.
Right. So fine. So I got a answer to the question that what is it that some companies do that make them successful, and what is it that companies do not do or which are not that successful?
In a
in this
nutshell,
sector.
learn to
Yeah.
listen. Actually, learn to listen. Listen to the market.
Right. So the closer you are to the market, because small cultural sensitivity can create a lot of difference, is what you are saying, right?
But here you're touching on something which I don't know. I'm a little bit hesitant because this is
Okay.
kind of self-promotion for BDD. But one of the reasons that we are cost competitive is because we deploy freelancers in the local location where people need to sell their product. So you don't have to come up front with hiring an office, setting up a salary for at least 12 months because nobody will come to work. So this allows testing of the markets in a relatively contained risk package
Okay.
that allows you to know what you are entering into and to have a realistic plan going
Okay.
forward.
Right. Right. So in our terminologies, we call it a dipstick study. So you go there,
Yep.
dip your stick, find out what is there, and then
No
you will
shortcuts.
study.
No
Right.
shortcuts. It doesn't work.
Right. Perfect. Okay. So, Gian, would you like to add any points that, in addition to what Oren said? you want to add anything on any characteristic or any experience that you had in the past with companies which were more successful in a particular field or in international business, and some companies who are not that successful? Are there some more characteristics that you have seen?
Jan, you're on mute.
You're right. Now you hear me. I said that I tried to make shorter my add-on to what Oren said. I think that growing abroad, it's a serious thing. Not it doesn't to be underevaluated, because it involves time, money, resources, and so on. And growing abroad obliges companies to satisfy some very strict conditions. And those who are from a certain part of the river are succeeding, others aren't. Among this list, I'll just quote some of them. To me, the first thing is to be sure to run a consolidated domestic business if you want to go export, if you want to go abroad, versus not having a consolidated domestic business. Why is that? There's a very simple reason. Since financing and international growth is often, very often, more expensive than growing locally, it's of very big importance, of paramount importance, to can count on a stable amount of cash to be invested into target markets. If you have them, okay, you make in the right way the first step. If you don't have them, or if you have them on a up and down basis, you start with the wrong feet, we used to say in my country. This is the first thing which, to me, differentiate, split successful and non-successful exporters. The second thing is to be sure to have an easily scalable production in order to can satisfy, hopefully, the increasing demand in the target country without creating issues to your current market. Growing there while you lose here is not a good idea. The third underlinement I would like to do is to avoid too ambitious plans. Companies who start thinking that they can really conquer a new market in a very short time, even if with a lot of money and so on, from my experience, are quite often doomed to not having success, because export involves really a lot of things. We have seen culture, we have seen a lot of behaviors, different behaviors from domestic country, from new countries, and so on. And these are all important things, but not very often visible, which can put your efforts at risk. So be sure that you have an excess of production. Be sure that you can really serve the new market without creating problems to your domestic one, to your old one. The fourth thing I'm thinking about is to check the target market. Not really just on theory, so with the market analysis, analyzing competition, possible customer base, marketing strategy, selling style, or selling channels, and so on, but also physically checking how your products could be received by potential consumers. This gives you a sort of super view about the future. It might be a silly thing, but it works very well, because you see frontline in persons and in real life how can the product be received by your customers. And this gives you a lot of information. It's something opening your mind and showing you the real path. beyond a lot of analysis and so on, which are necessary. I don't want to, how can I say, diminish their value, but at the same time, you have to couple also practice with theory, because otherwise the situation could become really very complicated. And the more money you put on that, the more troubles you risk to have. One last thing is to me, I'm an engineer, so I'm. Yesterday, someone told me that I looks like an hexagon. But joking apart, I think that making a realistic plan, a detailed one, is very, very important. And at the same time, it's very important to stick with it. And all these facts are, to me, dividing those companies which could be successful to those which start with the wrong feet in export operations. So if you have this checklist and you mark in the right way these 4 or 5 actions, you start in the right way. And you have good possibility to perform well also in different markets. Otherwise, well, your risk profile is risk to be very high.
Yeah, so thank you both Oren and Jian for giving your inputs. So what I understand is, of course, there are risks associated with international business, but we have to be assured, we have to know those risks before we enter the market. We have to take realistic figures. We have to check realistic facts of what are the characteristics of that market, and then after knowing all these things, make a plan, stick to their plan, and go ahead. So that's the way to be successful in this business. So
Exactly.
right. So the 2 points I would like to sum up in this discussion. The first point is related to a small and medium scale industry. I think a small and medium scale industry, when we say in particularly in India, it's not about productivity. It's not about low cost. Low cost can be done, or low cost is possible when we take in volumes, global volumes, make big factories like China and produce at a rate very low as compared to any international market or any international manufacturing destination. But when we talk of small, beautiful companies, we talk of creating the niche and then finding more market outside the conventional market for that niche. So this is one deduction that I take from this discussion. The second point is what I see in general, despite what is happening, how volatile the market is, how how complex the business environment is, I see 2 typical characteristics. There are areas which are too crowded, which are very cost competitive, and where everybody wants to go and everybody is there. And one of this is COVID products right now. And there are markets where no, people do not have access. People do not know much about those markets, and because people do not know much about those markets, it's they are less cost competitive. And that is the reason why a lot of companies which are small, despite being small, have a global customer base and thick margins. That is what they do when they create that kind of a niche. So also in the sector from which I belong, aerospace and defense, there are suppliers, there are manufacturers, there are subcontractors where it's only and only cost that matters. But there are areas, there are technologies where people are less privy to, and because people do not know about those technologies, that is why the profitability, the growth, and the success of that company is also hidden. So this is what I say. So with this I move to Vijay, and I would like to ask, of course the times is challenging, everybody is facing problems related to, almost everybody is facing problems related to liquidity, and sustenance is a questionable thing for everybody right now. Thriving is the next step. But do you see areas also in textile sectors where companies, new entrants, can go and create the niche and be successful? Do you see any of those areas in textile
Yeah,
sector right now?
yeah, Vikas. Definitely, see, there is one is fashion. Then the second area where I see is the technical textiles, which almost cover every segment, right from agriculture to healthcare to automotive sector. So textiles now are being increasingly used in almost all sectors. So I feel, and again, if you see the products, each of these products, the number of contexts they are being used is continuously evolving. In the car, if you take, there was a seat cover. Now there are a whole segment of composites which are continuously kind of evolving. And even now, some of the products which are, say, plastic or a steel is being replaced with some kind of new textiles. So I see that there are I think more than 300-400 such products which have sizable quantities. So I think that there is definitely an opportunity just beyond the COVID products or traditional fashion products. There are these blue oceans which are in some of the countries they exist. But I feel that it could be a great opportunity for Indian companies to manufacture here. For example, of course, there are like seat belt companies, right? You have, though they are not really SMEs, but that is one segment, which was not at all being done in India. Airbags were not being done in India. Now they are being done right now. So we have this parachute fabric, all these different end user applications which are evolving. I feel that even acoustics, the acoustics are there. So everywhere you need textile products. So I feel that technical textiles is one area where it provides a lot more opportunities right now. And the second opportunities is also in terms of moving up the market, where we are right now. Say we were at a low cost and say medium. So can we move up the value chain a bit, making a better, improving the quality, or even positioning R&D. So you probably move up the value in terms of ladder. I think that is another area where SMEs should really focus rather than competing in the low cost crowded fashion segment.
What I get from all the discussion is, of course, there are opportunities for SMEs, even in this environment, to go into a sector, choose a sector, choose a product that is very niche, create that niche and grow global. That's the way to be successful. So with this, I would like to conclude the session and invite the audience for questions that they would be interested in to ask any of the panelists. So anybody wants to ask a question, to any of the panelists, they can ask us directly. But if they want to ask general, then of course anybody can answer. So over to the audience if there are any questions or queries related to the subject. So I see a question from Mr. Shubham Agrawal in the chat, and he says that, thank you for your valuable inputs. May I request you to touch upon what steps an SME can take to identify a target foreign market? So he's saying, how do we find out? Because there are so many countries, so many places. How do we find out which is the foreign market we should target? What could be the way to go ahead? I understand the dipstick study strategy and required market research. However, how to shortlist a market to apply such strategies? So anybody can answer from the panel.
I would love to take that one. Thank you, Subham. It's a very good question because the planet is big. And if you follow what we said earlier, we said start small, start focused. So this is a very relevant question. how do we know where to put the finger? So we take a dipstick, but where to put it, where to dip it. We use a methodology which is called Canvas, which takes a multidimensional analysis of different areas in the market and allows us to create some kind of a topographic map, I would say, where you can see the valleys and the high places, so that you know where you have potential. But now you have to figure out to yourself potential for what? Because many times the place to test a product and to test acceptance is not necessarily the place where you will go for mass markets. Many times the circumstances or the different dimensions that will dictate where should you do the first test, where should you start the examples, are fed by other considerations, not only price point possibilities or market size or market growth, if it is growing. For instance, one of the things that is very, very important when you are doing a dipstick analysis is to see the behavior of the market regarding the responsiveness to probing questions. Are they people that when a sales rep would come to them and say, hey, would you like to use this or that, they would answer, rather than people that when you come and ask them, would you like to use this or that, will turn and go away. Okay, and these two kind of people, I would say Southern European would test one of them and will be very talkative and responsive. If you try to sell it in Sweden, you have a problem. Okay, they will turn around and go. So what kind of tactics does it allow itself to be deployed in that market is a consideration. So you do a multidimensional analysis. You look at parameters of market size, market growth, price points, competition. Do we have, are we going into a saturated market? Are we going to need market education, which is a very high cost item? But after you do all this analysis, you kind of set yourself in a visual context that allows you to say, okay, I would rather start here and do the test here. I think that's the way.
Yeah, I had some in terms of context about this. How do you typically identify which are the markets one should target? See, for SMEs, I agree what Oren said about it. So another thing with SMEs is that you have to look sometimes inward, right? What capability you have. Do you have a reliable partner, say in Japan or in US or whichever country? You might have a reliable partner, trusted partner in Brazil. So I feel that is one thing which is going to be important, having a trusted partner who can rely on. So the second is that if you don't have it, how are you planning to approach? You will have many barriers, which may be a language barrier. So overall, whatever your capabilities are, I'm going to only target, say, English-speaking countries, right? So that could be one approach. The second is that even the country from a perspective, even you have this sites called like, OTEXA or UN Comtrade, where most of this data, import-export data is very well captured. So you can really understand in your segment, you can yourself do the analysis saying that is this market, you analyze the market among shortly, say, 5 countries, and see, is the market growing in these countries? Again, Oren has told, I'm just repeating, is it growing or is it mature? Or even you can see that, what kind of pricing are they buying at? Are they very low cost and average cost is very less? So these are maybe some of the considerations also you can look at before you entering a new market.
Okay, so thank you. I hope Shubham's question was answered up to his expectation. Okay.
I'll add just a very quick thing to what has been said to that.
Okay.
It's a way for underlining an approach which I've seen in many years. It's successful. Start small and slow.
Right.
So a small niche market, make all the tests physical and theoretical, and go step by step. Don't
Okay.
aim too high, and your life will be easier for sure. I'm sure
Right.
about that.
Right. And by doing this, you also do not risk yourself too much. So you test the market. Once the result is positive, then might be we can increase the volume or increase the speed with which we are growing. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. So we have a second question from Mr. Kumar, who says that, can we have a business which can be global to start with? Anybody in the panelists would like to answer this question? Can we have a global business to start with?
Can you please repeat that, because I've lost you, because
Yeah. So the question is, can we have a business, a global business to start with? So in India, I'm sitting in India. I want to start a business, and start exports to start with. Is it possible? And in which condition is it possible?
Can I
let's
answer
say
that?
that it's very challenging, first of all, extremely challenging. And well, I don't know. I don't
I
know.
guess that there are examples like that of people that created businesses that have no local context, that are from the get-go, they are international businesses.
Right.
Bitcoin. Okay, Bitcoin is an international thing. It has no locality. But I think that, especially in manufacturing focus, this is not a reality. I think that it is extremely hard to penetrate the world with a product that you've just started. You, in a way, it even has, as an entrepreneur, it has some arrogance in it, which is going to be backfiring on you, because by designing a product that will go globally from the get-go means you think you know what the market is going to want after version number 9. And usually when you start at the beginning with your drawings and what the actual product that consumers will buy is kind of a different story. You start with an assumption, you start with a direction, the market directs you where to go with it. Going global, like either you have a very, very good idea, sometimes it does help, it does happen. Like, for instance, a few years ago, a couple of years ago, I think, there was a new avatar on one of the smartphones gadget that everybody started playing, looking for hidden treasures that were virtual inside the map on a Google Map something.
Pokemon.
So this is something that went viral all over the world in 48 hours. Okay, if you have that product, yeah, go for the entire platform. But normal people with normal products, no, it doesn't work. You need to establish yourself. You need to establish your brand. Usually going into another market is not something that you do with your own muscle. Usually immediately following understanding the market, you will go for a distribution agreement with a local, with one of the local distribution networks, so that you speed your time to market. Otherwise, you need to develop a lot of stuff that are very upfront investment, very consuming. So I'm trying to figure myself in a situation, trying to solicit to a distribution network to take on a product of someone that didn't make it. He just thinks about it. And he says, yeah, I can give you any capacity you want, and I can be that quality, and I can be that features. And not in the real world. It doesn't work.
Okay.
My experience. Maybe it does, but my experience, it doesn't work.
Probably this very challenging thing could be facilitated by digital products, because in digital world you can change in 1 nanoseconds almost everything. But if you are talking about physical products, I think it's a very hard life, definitely.
Right. Right.
Wherever there is more network economics, I think that's where this kind of products will work. But I think most of the physical product is very difficult to have network economics. So probably it won't work.
Right. Right. I think probably a foreign collaboration kind of a thing could be required if somebody in India wants to grow global. So might be he can tie up with a technology provider in say Israel, and of course we are talking about it with Business Dynamics right now. The discussion is still at a nascent stage where Business Dynamics will bring in a lot of technologies from Israel, and we will bring in manufacturers from India to invest in those technologies and go ahead. So but then all alone without a joint venture, without a technology partner, of course it is not possible. It's very difficult, or it's highly unlikely. There could be some cases as in technology side, in IT side, but it's highly unlikely. So we are running out of time. So I would like to conclude now this discussion. So thanks for joining, everybody. Thanks to the panelists, for elite panelists, to for giving their inputs, which was of course very good and very qualitative, very good. So thanks to all of you for joining, for your patience. And all of you in the audience can connect with us, or me in particular, at vikas.manrat@solutionbuggy.com. You can register yourself, go to our website, see the product, and then we can be in contact. If you want to get in contact with any of the panelists, again, it's the same way. You can send me an email. I'm in contact with all three of them. I know them very well, and we'll go ahead with that. So any questions written in the chat would be answered, and you can send your questions to me at vikas.mandral@solutionbuggy.com. So thanks all of you for joining. It was a nice discussion, and of course enriching for the audience, I guess. Thank you.